Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. And a happy opening day to all of you that love misery like Horwat and I do, because we're Pittsburgh Pirates fans and we're ready for another summer of, well, maybe a little bit better. Nice mug there for those watching on Inside the Penguins from Nick Horwat with the best logo the Pittsburgh Pirates have had. Honestly, you know what? No, I like the square yellow. Looked like
Yep.
a piece of plywood with I don't know what it's called. So
The actual human faces they used were also much nicer.
But happy opening day to all the
Yes.
Pirates fans out there. Obviously, both me and Horwat do partake in Pirates fandom, which is what keeps us humble and what kept us humble when the Steelers and Penguins were winning championships. And now, it is a dark day in Pittsburgh, as it's turned out to be. The Pittsburgh Penguins had a bad loss to the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday. We're not going to talk much about that because at this point in the season, obviously, the Penguins' most important game is the next one ahead of them. They didn't get any help on Wednesday evening either, as both the Florida Panthers and New York Islanders were able to snatch a victory. And the Penguins are back in action later this evening to try to get back on the right track against the Nashville Predators, the start of a 3-game homestand at PPG Paints Arena. But where we're going to start in this episode is with Tristan Jarry, because he has not played since the Penguins' 5-2 win over the Colorado Avalanche last Tuesday. DeSmith, on the other hand, had played the last 3 games. They were riding the hot hand, is what Mike Sullivan said when they put Casey DeSmith in on Tuesday against Detroit. And it's fair to say that he cooled off pretty substantially in that game.
Yeah, the Penguins are in quite a pickle. It's either Casey DeSmith, who is Casey DeSmith, let's just be honest. He had a couple of good games, and you know what? He looked better than Tristan Jarry for a little while. Or your other option is Tristan Jarry, who you don't know what you're getting game after game. It's the same situation for both goalies, and this is not an ideal situation. I pity Mike Sullivan for his choice he has to make every game.
Well, yeah, the goaltending has not been phenomenal for the Pittsburgh Penguins all season long. And the question I want to ask this, because I expect Tristan Jarry to be between the pipes tonight against Nashville. If he's not, then it speaks more towards what type of injury he's facing, that he's not able to start games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, if he's backing up, I would imagine at this time of the year, if he's backing up with how important these games are, that he's probably healthy enough to play. So he should be healthy enough to start.
Yeah, you know what? At this point, he should, if he's healthy enough to be a backup, he should be healthy enough to be started, considering what he went through last season. Yeah. He wasn't fully healthy to finish off the season, the regular season, for what it's worth and whatever happened in there. In those last few games he played before fully being taken out. And then game 7 with a broken foot, basically. If he's willing to go that far and the team is willing to push him that far, I'm not saying we're in a game 7 situation, but every game from here on in, I think we have 8 left.
Yep.
Those last 8 are going to be just as important as a playoff game, because sure, the Florida Panthers cooled off quite a bit in the last few games. They won last night to pull within a point of us. The Islanders also won their second straight to now be 5 points ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
We got some catching up to do. We have to fend off the Panthers as much as possible. Catching the Islanders is possible with 2 games in hand. But as always, and as usual, you have to win those games in hand. And that includes that game in hand. We have a game in hand against the Panthers tonight. I know Nashville is in the same sort of boat, maybe a little below us, but this is going to be they're not going to be an easy target. That's the long and the short of it. No matter who we're playing, they're not going to be easy targets. It's going to be quite an adventure, too. I mean, like I said, Nashville is they're 3 points out of a playoff spot. They're 3 points behind Winnipeg, and if you know anything about what Winnipeg's been doing, their head coach is unhappy. Does Mike Sullivan need to bring that sort of angry energy into the Penguins locker room? It's a question that can be asked, but for now, Nashville's got some fighting to do. It's an uphill battle for them, but yeah, the Penguins are in the same boat. They both have 82 points. There's the similarities. It's time to both these teams want to wake up a little. Both of these teams want to prove that they can be something, and the Penguins need to prove it more.
Yeah, they really need to get things going here in the last 8 games of the season if they want to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. My question for Jarry then becomes, with 8 games left, we expect him to potentially be the starting goaltender later this evening against the Predators. Does his future in Pittsburgh ride on his performance in these final 8 games? Because his contract's up at the end of the season. We've talked about it basically every episode for the past month. Do you think that his performance in this last 2 weeks of the season determines whether or not he becomes the Penguins' goaltender of the future once again?
I would assume so. I would definitely assume so, because if he flunks the test and they miss out, then yeah, that's that on both of them, honestly. But if he passes the test and we get in, I would say there's still another test on the horizon. But as of right now, I mean, it very much does hinge on these next 8 games. Definitely starting there with that starting point, and then seeing what happens. Everyone's gonna take it a game at a time. But I'm curious to know how much scoreboard watching goes into this time of year, especially for these guys. For some of them who've never been in a position like this, or only have once or twice, given how 2015 turned out. This is a new territory for a lot of this team. So I'm curious to know how much of these guys are looking around the league. I know obviously they're focused on what is in front of them, but you see Florida win last night. Now they're a point on you, and yeah, their schedule isn't easy, but they beat one of the teams that we said on the last episode is one of their hardest opponents. So they're proving to be able to do something, and it's a matter of stepping up. Oh, sorry, Florida does play tonight. I forgot. They have a back-to-back. Florida plays tonight in Montreal. That's, again, like I said, I know no opponent is easy, but they have the easier test tonight than the Penguins do.
Yeah. The good thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins and for Tristan Jarry is in this final stretch of games, Jarry has a 5-1-2 record against the teams remaining on the schedule. The only teams he hasn't played are the Detroit Red Wings and the Chicago Blackhawks. So he's performed well against a lot of these teams. The 3 losses come combined against the Boston Bruins, of course, and the New Jersey Devils, who the Pittsburgh Penguins have just struggled against in general this season. So they need him to perform well. He needs himself to perform well in order to get the money that he wants this offseason. The last question I'll ask, and it doesn't have to be a long-winded answer, if he plays well to get the Penguins in the playoffs, like we just talked about, if he, say, stands on his head and he is one of the primary reasons, because he's not going to be the sole reason, but if he's one of the primary reasons why the Penguins make the playoffs, but he doesn't perform in the postseason once they get there, is that also I'm moving on from you type of performance?
Most likely. Yeah, I would say most likely. Because, like we mentioned, getting to the playoffs is one thing, winning a round is a whole nother. If we get in and lose for the sixth straight season in the first round, sweeping changes are coming. Regardless. It doesn't really matter who we're facing or how we get in. It's a matter of winning at that time of year. Mm-hmm. I at least think that no matter what happens, not no matter what happens, but if we lose in the first round or if we don't make it, the outcome is the same. It's going to be the same outcome. And let's be real, if we make it in, sure, we're all confident in certain things going the correct way. We're all fans and hoping that the right players show up at the right time. Sidney Crosby carries the team. Maybe, like we're discussing, Tristan Jarry steals the series, steals the show. Sure, we're all hoping for that, but we are all of us are very much not expecting that. Mm-hmm. So I think either way, the outcome is going to be the same. And that part of that outcome includes Tristan Jarry being on his way out. It's getting to that point. It's you have, and I don't know who you can find and for another goalie. Might just have to make a deal. Might have to make a trade because the free agent market isn't looking ideal. So
no, it is not.
You have to play smart. And first of all, step one is on, let's say we miss out, season ends on April 13th. April 14th or 15th, I would expect a new general manager to get announced. Also.
Yeah.
But that's a bridge to cross when we get there. And for now, I say, yeah, that is what you found. Okay. For now, I would expect that win or lose the regular season here, the result's going to be the same this summer.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things also, a conversation that we can have in the offseason is look at a lot of the Eastern Conference competitors and all of the contenders. They've really started to switch their goaltending around much more so than in years past. I mean, you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, it seems like they're on a different goaltending path season by season. You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, they cut bait with Freddie Anderson a couple years ago. They cut bait with Jack Campbell last year. Now they bring in Samsonov and Murray. You look at the Bruins. Yes, Tuukka Rask retired, but they went with Swayman and Allmark. And you look at the Capitals. They cut bait on their two young goaltenders. So it might just be the way of the land at this point that Tristan Jarry, unless he's able to pull out dominant performances both in the regular season and then in the postseason, that might be the writing on the wall. I think we all agree that the Penguins can't bring back both of these goaltenders next season. No. If Jarry is back, Casey DeSmith can't be the backup. And if Casey DeSmith is back, Tristan Jarry can't be the starter. So changes are coming, but I think it's fair to say that it is now or never for Tristan Jarry. He certainly will not hurt his chances if he goes out there and plays poorly. Because I think at this point, the opinion of the fan base, at least the overwhelming majority, is that they need something new there, and Tristan Jarry is not above criticism by far. But let's move over and talk about somebody that is being criticized heavily, and for good reason, and that's Mikael Granlund. Since coming to Pittsburgh on March 2nd, Mikael Granlund, in 13 games played, has scored only 3 points, one of them being a goal. His experiment on the line with Evgeny Malkin quickly got shut down by Mike Sullivan on Tuesday. And by quickly, I mean by the end of the first period, Mikael Granlund was no longer on the second line alongside Evgeny Malkin and Jason Zucker. Can this revenge spot for Granlund, because that's what it is if you want to call it that. I don't know if we can necessarily call it that with every single player that gets traded just because of how much player movement there is in every professional sport now, but it's technically by sports definitions a revenge spot for Mikael Granlund going up against the Predators, a team that traded him just 3 weeks ago.
I don't think it will. That's right. We played them just before the trade. I was like, didn't they also already play? No, just before the trade they played. That's right, because there was the joke of Hextall has seen enough from Granlund. He wants some.
Yeah, he had 2 breakaway opportunities on Tristan Jarry, missed the net on one, and then put a muffin on the net in the other. And so far, that tracks with his time in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and there was something about that last game that just stunk, right? Something about that Detroit game that just left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. He went from having 0 shots in the previous 2 games to looking to refuse to shoot at every opportunity he had, right? Yeah. Was that the big – he had 4 shots on goal. Did you know that?
Yeah, how many of those were muffins that he whiffed on? It just trickled in on Alex Nedeljkovic.
Exactly.
I mean, it was, the first 5 minutes, it was a 3-on-2. He had a great opportunity, and it looks like he was playing shuffleboard on the deck of a Carnival cruise line, not shooting an actual ice hockey puck.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like he took 4 shots. It's quite baffling. It's quite baffling. He has 3 points, like you said. 2 of them came in one game, and then one of them came against the Capitals. So there's some spread there. There is some distance between those points. Mm-hmm. Oh, we pay him next year too. Although the thing about this is if we're stuck with him at least until the start of next season, right? He has to prove himself to be worth anything to trade out of because he doesn't have a clause or anything. He's a dealable player. But
a $5 million for 2 more year player, that there's going to be a very limited number of teams that are going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll take that.
Exactly. It's much like how Brock McGinn, Kasperi Kapanen this year were dealable players, but who wanted them, really? I mean, yes, we have answers in Anaheim and St. Louis. St. Louis, by the way, surprisingly. But it's still, though. It's a matter of we don't know who actually wants this player. Hey, if Hextall says that so many teams wanted him during, in the past few deadlines, like I said this, I think then, call him up. Call them up. See what if he's telling the truth there and saying those other teams wanted him, and again, this might even go toward the next GM this summer, call them up. Call up who exactly those teams are and say, do you still want them? Well, let's figure something out here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see this whole revenge game having any kind of meaning or having any sort of adding any juice to it. He's just in a bad spot. He's in a bad spot. I mean, the Penguins are in a bad spot. Not getting much out.
Yeah, he doesn't shoot very often, and when he does, it rarely ends up being a quality shot on goal. He has 21 shots in 13 games as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. 1.6 shots per game is what that equates to. And even when he's shooting, like I said, not many great shots. 4.8% shooting percentage, his only goal against the Philadelphia Flyers in that route where it seems like everybody on Pittsburgh was going to score a goal that game. So
he
not
scored a garbage time too. He was like the last one.
Yeah, it's not a great start for Mikael Granlund in Pittsburgh. Obviously, we don't wish the worst upon him. We hope that he's able to, realize his potential. It would be great for the Pittsburgh Penguins if he did just kind of throw it back to Minnesota days. I know Jason Zucker is kind of sticking his neck out there for him because they used to play together, but it's coming to the point where I know it's only 13 games, but looking at what the Penguins situation is now, looking at what his contract is, looking at the performance all encompassing over the past 3 weeks, it is shaping out in my eyes that Mikael Granlund is the worst trade deadline headliner of the Crosby era. There's always that one guy that you say, okay, that was the main acquisition. This year, it's Mikael Granlund. And I feel like I went back through, there are not very many others that are even on that level. And I honestly think there's nobody that's worse.
Derek Brassard comes to mind right away.
2018. Yeah. But the only thing about Derek Brassard that I noted was he also had a $5 million cap hit and he also had an extra season on there, but the Penguins were able to use a third party and get $2 million of that retained.
That's fair. That's a good point.
And even before that, I mean, for Jim Rutherford's sake, before he was traded, there was no reason to believe that he wasn't going to be able to succeed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
he was playing fairly well for the Ottawa Senators when the Penguins acquired him, and he was known as a playoff performer, whereas Granlund has none of that pedigree.
Yeah, and not only that, Brassard has not only did he underperform at Pittsburgh, he went on to go other places and perform at the top of his game again. We don't know if we're getting that again from Granlund here. So just that little Derek Brassard thing came to mind right away. And you're right. Also, who we lost in Ian Cole, also not a great help to it. But
yeah.
Other than that one, though,
I have two here if you want to hear them.
Yes, just because I can't think of any right now.
It's actually surprising how good a lot of the trade deadlines have been in the Crosby era. Like how well it has worked out for the Pittsburgh Penguins. There aren't too many misses. Now, you can say individual trades, but headliner-wise, like obviously the ones that come to mind, 2013 Jerome McGinley, obviously 2011 James Neal, Matt Niskanen, Justin Schultz in 2017. 2009 was... trying to remember Chris Kunitz and Chris Kunitz. 2008 was Marian Hossa. 2007 was Gary Roberts. Also in 2009 in that season was Bill Guerin. So like a lot of good trade deadlines for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Crosby era. Brassard was a bad one. Granlund, as I've said, I think is the worst. 2014, it was Lee Stepniak. That's rough. But again, situationally, Lee Stepniak was on an expiring deal. He was a rental.
And we'd take Lee Stepniak in right now, man. We would take that player right now.
I was pumped for getting Lee Stepniak at that time. Now, I didn't know as much about hockey at that moment because that was 9 years ago. But Lee Stepniak as a headliner, that's questionable. But also, 2006 was the only other year that I would say that they had a worse headliner, because they were sellers at the deadline in 2006 in Crosby's rookie year. So if you're saying that you could argue about 3 out of 18 years that he is maybe better than, and I would say he's not, but I can understand why people would say, you know what, Granlund's still better than Lee Stepniak. Let's pump the brakes. You could argue it, but I would say that he is the worst trade deadline headliner of the Sidney Crosby era.
Yeah, you do have to take in the full I don't know. The
situation?
Yeah, thank you. Situation. The full situation of the Lee Stepniak deal. Expiring deal. You said that was 14, like 13, 14?
Yes.
Is it the shortened year, or do I always get that wrong?
No, the shortened year was 2012. 13 was the year that everybody cleaned house afterwards.
Yeah, so 13-14 was also just not the Penguins' best year. I mean, there was that trend of pretty bad playoff losses, and I think that year was one of them.
They got a series win, I believe, against Ottawa in the first round. Or no,
Okay.
2014, excuse me. That was the Brian Gibbons year. Brian Gibbons against Columbus in 2014, and then they lost to the Rangers in the second round.
Oh, yeah, actually, that was kind of a fun playoff round.
Listen, Brian Gibbons was the man.
And we did push the Rangers to 7 that year. So
I think Bo Bennett also scored in game 1 of that playoff season against Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. It was a 5-0 victory for the Pittsburgh Penguins over Columbus. I think Bo Bennett actually scored the first goal. I'd have to go back and check.
Game 1 of just because I have it up and this is a total tangent. Game 1 of the Columbus versus Pittsburgh series. First goal scored, Jack Johnson.
Oh, okay. Well, Jesus. Wait. Oh, wait. Jack Johnson for Columbus?
Yup.
I thought they shut him out in that one.
Nope. 4-3 victory. And Bo Bennett, though, did score a power play goal to bring, because the Blue Jackets went up 3-1. Bo Bennett scored to make it 3-2, thus starting a big run to the victory.
Yeah. Well, the 2014 playoffs. At least they got a series win in the 2014 playoffs. Is something we can't say about them over the past 4 seasons. But no, since the trade deadline, the Pittsburgh Penguins, their statistics don't look great. They're 6-7-1 is their record. 20th in the National Hockey League in goals per game. They were 13th prior to the deadline. 26th in goals allowed per game since the deadline. 15th prior. 13th on the power play since the deadline. 14th before that. So a little uptick there on the man advantage. But it does not help on the man disadvantage. The penalty kill is 26th since the trade deadline on March 3rd. It was 15th prior. And when you think about where Mikael Granlund plays, he was brought in to help with the penalty kill. So that also goes against his record. But the Penguins need him to play better. That's basically the fact. They didn't practice yesterday, so we don't know where he's going to land in the lineup. We know that he's going to fall from the second line. I would imagine he ends up playing once again on the third line with Ryan Poehling and Danton Heinen. But
yeah,
we're going to take a quick break. When we return, Crosby is on the chase for 1,500. We'll ask when he could reach that milestone right after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. My name is Nick Brlansky. That's Nick Horwat joining me on the other side of the screen here. And Sidney Crosby is chasing down a number that only 14 other men have ever accomplished in the history of the National Hockey League. And that is 1,500 career points. He's currently 6 points away from that mark, which would, like I said, make him the 15th player in NHL history to hit that benchmark. With 8 games to go, does he eclipse 1,500 on the season, Horwat?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty... That one is the simple answer of this.
In the situation that this team is in as well, it's not looking good for their playoff chances. They need the wins, and Sidney Crosby seems to be one of the few that can really will this team into a playoff spot. I think he gets it. If I was to wager the guess as to when it happens, I'm going to say at Detroit, because why not cap the season off? The last home game's the next game, the April 11th against the Blackhawks. Fan appreciation night, I believe. I don't know. I'm not even gonna say too much about it. Maybe the shirts off their back thing is back. I don't know. But fan appreciation night, no less. It's the last home game of the year. Maybe we have a playoff spot by then. The vibes will be high. Why not start the game with so last game in Detroit, Sidney Crosby scored his 1,500th point. Here to give him a plaque and this, that, and the other is this, then this. Why not have a Sidney Crosby ceremony to cap off the season? Because also, I think Penguin Awards happen soon too if they're still doing that, and if they still do game ceremonies for it. Why not just have vibes, right, guys? Come on, last game of the season, they're playing against the god-awful Chicago Blackhawks. Let's just close out the regular season with vibes, especially if we're not going to make it, too. There's even that in there, too. If they're not going to make it, why not try and end on as high of a note as possible?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking it happens in Detroit. That's just my storybook ending, per se.
Mm-hmm. 6 points to go. He would need to have at least 2 points per game for my scenario to happen. But doesn't it just feel like anytime Crosby's coming up on a milestone, the Flyers just sit there just enough games down the schedule?
Just waiting for it. Yeah, my scenario went a point per game. I like your idea, too, of it being...
Well, because after that game in Detroit, you know he's going to be more fired up because the entire team did not show up. And I talked about it on yesterday's Penguins to Go. That's on him. Like, that's on him. That's on Malkin. That's on Letang. And that's on Sullivan. Like, if the entire team doesn't show up against a team that had lost 12 of their last 15 games and you lose on the road in a pivotal game that could have really sat you pretty with 2 weeks to go in the season, and you just flat out don't show up and you lose the game outright in regulation, that's going to eat away at Sidney Crosby. Coming back for a 3-game homestand here, I feel like with the playoffs on the line, 3 games at PPG Paints Arena, I see Crosby going absolutely berserk. Obviously, tonight's game is the response game. Saturday, he always gets up for Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has to. Like, you need to make the playoffs. Boston is looking to chase down history, so they're not going to come in and take it easy on you. That's going to be, in my opinion, a really, really pivotal game to the Penguins playoffs. Because if they can steal a win against the Boston Bruins when they're chasing history, I think that's going to go a long way in getting them into the postseason. So with that in mind, I see Crosby, because he scored his 500th goal against the Philadelphia Flyers. I see him getting number 1,500 against the Flyers as well. But also, if you want to bring the celebration, the ceremony into it, the Penguins go on the road against the New Jersey Devils 2 days later. Obviously, they won't be doing that at Prudential Center. And then they play the Minnesota Wild on Thursday, where good old buddy Marc-Andre Fleury and general manager Bill Guerin will be in the house, probably.
I got one more for you. If all things go well, that's Sunday against Philadelphia is Chris Letang's 1,000th game.
Well,
forgot about that one. Yeah.
I haven't been looking at game totals, but yeah, that would be something. His 5th, I don't know. That'd be kind of mean because, like, Chris Letang 1,000th game. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of fanfare. Obviously, the ceremony is going to be there. Crosby scoring his 1,500th. It's storybook in a season where there's been a lot of storybook things happening.
I'm just picturing like
Crosby the Letang in overtime for 1,500.
First of all, why are we in overtime against the Flyers?
Well, like we said, I was thinking storybook, and that's where I went with it.
You're right. But secondly, I'm picturing the photograph after the game. They're both holding their pucks. Because here's the thing,
break it in half.
You could do that. The Penguins they have a weird history of multiple
milestones occurring at the same time.
Yeah, I think, what was it? I think 3 players hit, it was 500, 600, or Mario and Ron Francis were 2 of them, and I think Joey Mullen all hit 100 of something on milestones on the same night.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. This could just add to it. There's a lot of fun that could happen on that Flyer game if all goes well. Sidney Crosby would have to go on a tear, though, too. And all things have to go well for Chris Letang.
2 points a game for the next 3 games. It's not out of the realm of possibility, especially for Sidney Crosby, especially with the season on the line and games at home, too.
Yeah, you're totally right. And then you're right about...
It'll certainly help if he scores 3 or 4 against the Predators tonight. That would be nice.
Yeah, and then it certainly helped. And I like the idea of, can we get Fleury to be a part of the ceremonies? Are we allowed to do that?
I mean, he'll be out on the ice, likely.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I'm sure there'll be
he might be backing up because Philip Gustafsson, great Penguins former prospect, is also over in Minnesota. So
that could be a little fun little ceremony too. So
yeah, can we get Kalen Addison and Philip Gustafsson to just come over and give Crosby his plaque? What could have been for the Pittsburgh Penguins? No, I'm just kidding. I really like Jason Zucker. But the other question I want to ask is this a little player projection here. Will Crosby score more or less next season than he does this year? Already at 85 points with 8 games to go. Do you think he eclipses that in 2023-24?
Well, let's see. So last year he only had 84 points. He's already surpassed his number from last year.
Yeah. But he was also injured at points last year.
Hey, in 69 games he did that last year, and 74 this year is at 85. So I guess that the rate is kind of dropping a little. I would say he does score less just because time hides from no one.
Yeah.
And this isn't saying that Crosby's going to go under a point per game or lose his momentum, but just maybe it's only slightly less.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the team has a little more help next year. Or in the same vein, maybe he has a little fire lit under him. But I'm going to roll with that it's going to be slightly less just because gut reaction.
Yeah, with 85 points already, and we just finished talking about how he's going to go on the tear in the next 8 games. I said he was going to have 2 points per game over the next 3.
We're expecting him to at least get 6 more points to hit 91. So
yeah. I don't know if he quite gets to I wouldn't project 100 points for Sidney Crosby next season. I don't know if I'd project 95. 90's within the realm of possibility. I do see him getting to at least 85 though, because I also think, whether or not you get a good general manager in here, I do think the team will look better around Sidney Crosby next season. I think there's a little bit more room to breathe, especially if the cap ends up going up the $4 million that some people are projecting. I think there's more room to breathe. I think either Hextall gets his head out of his butt, which I wouldn't put my money on it, or he gets fired, which I would probably put my money on it at this moment in time. I think the team around him is going to be better. I think that gives the opportunity for Rickard Rakell to either play the full season with Crosby or Brian Rust to have a bounce back season, because I don't think Brian Rust is going to have a year as bad as he has this year once again. So I think the team around him is better. I think the power play is better next season. There's a lot of reasons that go into that. So I think he gets at least 85 points. And the reason that's important to me is if he gets at least 85 points, that will put him into a tie for 11th all time with Ray Bourque and bring him within 11 points of Phil Esposito for top 10 all time in NHL scoring. At the end of the day, that is, the postseason streak is great. I know a lot of people are talking about it. I know playoff hockey is phenomenal, and we've been blessed as fans, as reporters, as media members, as just hockey observers to watch this team over the past 17 years. But Sidney Crosby at least getting into the top 10 of point scoring all time, that's something that I would say is a better feather in the cap for Crosby's career than 17 years straight in the postseason. I mean, it's 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. They're both tremendous accomplishments. One is more of a solo accomplishment. One's more of a team accomplishment. Yeah. You know which one Crosby would choose, but I think he at least eclipses that 85 and pressures Phil Esposito for top 10 next season.
Yeah, and that's just next season. Remember, he'll have years after that too, which is even more fun.
He at least has one more on his contract.
Yeah, I for sure agree with you that one day he will be in the top 10 of scoring. Like, that's just bound to happen.
Yeah.
It's a matter of when. I mean, like I said, I like the idea of it being next year, where we could be having the same sort of discussion next season of, he's not chasing down 1,500, but maybe he's looking at, we have like 5 games left. All right, he's this many away from Esposito for top 10. When does he do it? Like, we could have this same discussion again next year. And we don't know what the team looks like. We don't know how things have gone, but this is the sort of formed discussion that we could have again. And that's exciting with a player like Sidney Crosby that, we've been blessed to watch him and his team play in the playoffs for 16 straight seasons. Do we want to see it again? Absolutely. But there is more to Crosby that, as much as he is a team-driven guy, watching him solely alone play hockey all these years has been a blessing too.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know why, but what you just said there kind of sparked a question in my mind. It's a very sports radio-esque question, not really a podcast question. Something you might hear on 93.7 The Fan because they love their Steelers. But if the Pittsburgh Penguins are able to pull out one more Stanley Cup victory in the Crosby era, maybe not this season, maybe next season, they get 6 total championships. In my head, I could never imagine the Pittsburgh Penguins tying the Pittsburgh Steelers in championships. But I think you could argue that they are much closer. I'm not saying they're close to a championship right now because this team is not a championship team. But you could argue they're much closer than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know. That's a weird thing. Do you think the Pittsburgh Penguins could ever overtake the Pittsburgh Steelers as number one in the city of Pittsburgh?
No. First of all, no. That's just the way the cookie crumbles here, and nothing against the Penguins in that situation. Me and you are good friends with Noah Strackman. We know what Steelers media, and we know what this city, and because the Steelers is a worldwide phenomenon, really.
Yeah, the Steelers are king.
Every state has a Steeler bar. Every state in the union. A lot of countries have Steeler bars. Like it's a worldwide thing. It's a little different, but I could see a time where, the hype looks better for the Penguins than it does for the Steelers. And another thing, what was I going to put at? I don't even remember. Continue with your laughing thought.
The union?
Every state in the union.
Dearest
you ever heard that saying?
Yeah, I've heard that saying from like Civil War reenactors, like the union. Dearest mother, I write home from the battlefields. Like that's the union? How old are you, Horwat? I know baseball is coming back and it gets everybody into like a nostalgic kind of mood. Everybody loves to talk about baseball like the 1920s, eh? But like the union got me. I don't know why.
So I would say, are you mad that I used just another term for the United States? Like,
no, I don't care. Like, great vocabulary. I applaud you, Horwat, but the union just threw me off. It's a little early in the morning to be throwing Civil War era-esque terms at me. To be completely honest, I'm not mad.
No, you're
I'm
good.
Not mad. I'm not even disappointed, Horwat. I'm not.
Oh yeah, and I remember the follow-up to it is pretty much I thought you were going to go down the line of which team in this city is closest to their next championship, which I'm sure it gets asked every offseason by every team. And at this very moment, I would say, honest to God, the correct answer might be Pitt football. Like or basketball. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, you see, Pitt basketball, great season. I don't want to. You're putting me in this position, and I kind of hate it. I don't want to dunk on Pitt basketball, but because they just had like a phenomenal season, the best basketball season for Pitt that I can remember in a long time, and most people can remember in a long time, like maybe even a decade. But that is such a difficult sport to win a championship. Like if you're talking about ACC title, then yes. But if you're talking about like March Madness, run the gauntlet. That is difficult. Like obviously, like we've seen Cinderellas this year and teams that were unexpected, even though they're really good. Like FAU, Kansas State went a great run this year. But like for Pitt to go and win a national championship in basketball, that is another level that they need to take. And it's just, I would say it's probably, and same thing with college football. Like we know who's going to win the championship in college football. It's going to be one of Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, or maybe a surprise Ohio State or Michigan one year. But
it's whoever the writers decide they want in.
Yeah, and even when it expands, that's what it's going to be. So, like, I would say it comes down to, and honestly, you could argue the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm not going to, even though I'd love to. Like 2025, Horwat, that's going to be.
That's true.
That's going to be our year as Pirates fans. But on a more realistic note, I would say it's probably still the Penguins.
Okay, you're probably right too.
Yeah. So
I mean, yeah, I'm sure. Like I said, I'm sure that's a question that gets asked every offseason. Like once every offseason starts for every team, it's the triannual. Is that what that means? If you have 3 times a year, I don't know. It's the triannual question in this town, right? Which sports team is the next to win a championship? Because this is that's the standard in this town. I get we're not like Boston who has results, but that is still the standard in this town. After all, it was the city of champions for a long time. Mm-hmm. Steelers with their 6, Penguins with their 5. I believe if they win a 6th, are they not the winningest expansion franchise? Isn't it only 5?
So
there's that to live up to. Yeah. And then
because the Oilers only have the 4.
And I think the Islanders only have the 4.
Yeah.
So I believe we would be. I digress. Oh, well. I think it is a very deep philosophical question, and honestly, the answer might be the college teams. But that being said,
I would go Pirates before I go to the college teams.
That's hilarious.
I wouldn't. Listen, all
that's,
right.
That's so funny. I agree with you. I just think it's funny.
It's opening day. My hopes are high. I know this team is going to hurt my feelings probably as early as tomorrow when they lose to one of the youngest starting pitchers on opening day in Cincinnati Reds history, who they're facing today. I know they're probably going to let me down and disappoint me. I hope they don't, but that's the life of being a Pirates fan. That's why I have that, that picture of pain with the Pirates P saved on my phone as probably my number one usage for social media pictures. But
I gotta buy.
I do think that they do have. I mean, they have young talent. The only question is, like, does this management ever give enough of a crap to pay for a winning team? And I don't know if that's possible, but Dylan Cruz looks fun. Make sure that you pick him number one overall, Pirates, because if not, it's just going to be more pain. I'm also excited for AJ Burnett to return for opening day PNC. So that's cool.
Yeah. So Crosby's chase for 1,500.
Yeah, we went on.
It'll happen this week.
Slight tangent. But nonetheless, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's the 2-week warning of the NHL season. We'll talk about what the Penguins need to do to get in. I just want to go on record at saying that this is what happens when you cancel practice, Mike Sullivan. You give us fewer storylines, you give us fewer things to talk about, and all of a sudden we revert back to the 1920s and even earlier, like the 1820s, and then we start talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates winning a World Series. Like, this is what happens. This is the consequences, Sully, when you cancel practices with 2 weeks to go in the regular season.
This is what happens when you give me a day off.
Yeah, my brain wanders and I lose focus. And you know what? I blame Mike Sullivan. Added on the list. I blame Mike Sullivan. Now, regardless, this is the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you, as always, by InsideThePenguins.com. There are 2 weeks remaining, Horwat, in the NHL regular season, which makes me very sad because, on one hand, with the end of the NHL regular season comes the NHL playoffs, and the first 2 weeks of the NHL playoffs are my Christmas. Like, my favorite sporting time of the year is that. I also like watching the NBA playoffs. I think that's a cherry on top for the second side, but the NHL playoffs are where it's at, and especially in round one. Some people say round two is better because the matchups are better, the teams are better, they both got a series win, but to be able to sit down and watch 4 playoff games a night, that is my nirvana. So 2 weeks until that happens, but it also means that 16 teams are done for the season. It means hockey is coming to a close. So those intrusive thoughts get into my head during my happiest time, but that's just how millennials' brains work at this point, I guess. But with 2 weeks remaining, how many games will the Pittsburgh Penguins need to win to reach the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I mean, that's you could get philosophical here, right? You could say they need 0 and then hope everyone else also gets 0. They're gonna need to win games, though, right? They're gonna need to win a couple.
That's fair. That's a fair statement. Yes.
So we have 8 remaining. Back to back with Boston, Philly. You're gonna need to win, I would say 6. I know that's a tall order. But not only do you want to win those games to solidify a spot, but you have to look good heading in. I'll knock it down to 5. How about that? I'll knock it down to 5. You got to win 5. You got to get 10 more points. It's not the magic number of 100 points for a season, but
they can't reach it.
They can't even reach. They'd have to win out. Oh, they'd have to do more than win out. They're not getting it.
They'd have to do more than win out. Yeah, they'd have to go back and beat the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, guess what? That being said, I'll give them 5. You gain 10 more points, maybe an overtime loss in there, maybe 2 overtime losses in there. You got to get every point possible. I would say 5. You give us 92 points. I like where that sits. Again, Florida's just a point back, so who knows what happens there, but I would say at minimum 5. And that's being really generous.
Yeah, it feels like they're going to need to hit at least 92 to 94 points to clinch a playoff spot. And right now, they don't control their own destiny when it comes to the New York Islanders and Wild Card 1. The Islanders do control that now, even though the Penguins have 2 games in hand. The 5-point separation, it really hurts the Pittsburgh Penguins. I cannot understate how bad that loss was on Tuesday for the Pittsburgh Penguins in this playoff seeding. But when you look at the remaining schedule, to get 92 to 94 points, it's 5 to 6 wins. When you look at the remaining schedule, in my eyes, it's kind of, I was going to say quartered off, but again, we're going to the triples. It's cut off in threes.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have obviously the 3-game homestand that you're starting later this evening. Nashville, Boston, Philly. You need 4 of the 6 points against those teams. Whether that is you steal, you need to either beat the 2 bad teams or you need to steal 1 from Boston. You need 4 of 6 points over the next 3 games. Then you have New Jersey and Minnesota, 2 playoff teams. I think you need to win at least 1 of those games or get 2 points. If you lose in overtime in both those games, I think you can survive with that. You'd like to win, but you need at least 2 of 4 points from New Jersey and Minnesota. And then the last 3 are really against teams that obviously we know now that no game is a given with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This team is volatile from period to period, not just game to game. But finishing the season at Detroit versus Chicago at Columbus, you should win at least 2 of those games. So
yeah, you should.
I think 5 to 6 is well within the realm of possibility, but the Penguins just need to show up and not do what they did against Detroit on Tuesday.
Yeah, and they need to get an upper hand on Detroit. I know we're not going to see them in the playoffs or anything like that, but dear God, you need something to build morale on, right? You got to take a win against Detroit just to feel good about yourselves. You don't have the chance anymore, but you had to take a win over, an extra win over a win over Carolina, maybe an extra win over the Rangers. You have a chance with New Jersey still to kind of find your footing. I think you got to get morality wins too. This isn't just a matter of catching points for the postseason, but feel good about yourself heading in.
Yeah. If you back into the postseason, you'll get what basically we saw with the Nashville Predators last season, which was just completely overmatched and never had a shot at even really taking more than 1 game against the Colorado Avalanche. They were also down to their 3rd-string goaltender, a situation that happened multiple times in the playoffs last year. But for the Pittsburgh Penguins, like I said, 5 or 6 wins out of 8 is probably necessary to make the playoffs. Because yes, you can scoreboard watch, but you don't want to leave it up to other people. Ask the Pittsburgh Steelers how fun it is to leave it up to the New York Jets versus the Miami Dolphins and Joe Flacco versus Spencer Thompson was his name, I think, for the Dolphins. You needed to have a rooting interest in that game to make the postseason. It's not fun. It's not smart, obviously. You don't want to leave your fate in somebody else's hands. So they need to take care of business, get 5 to 6 wins. If they do that, I feel pretty confident that they are going to make the postseason. But, man, the Florida Panthers, they got that win last night with Alex Lyon in net. So,
man.
they're a team that, despite the quick 4-game skid that they had, that's the only reason the Pittsburgh Penguins are still in the position they are. They're a team that's not going to be, taking themselves out of it. At least I wouldn't expect them to. But at the same time, there's a reason all these teams are fighting for playoff positioning. It's because, they haven't been consistent all season long.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we'll see what the Penguins are able to do on game 1 of their 3-game homestand later tonight against the Nashville Predators. Revenge game for Mikael Granlund, for what it's worth. We'll see what he's able to do. But that's going to do it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.